Part 20. Group Pet Koi Little Baby, She is Soft and Sweet. Author, Pearfish. Chapter 191. Chapter 191 I'm waiting for you on the top floor. Who is she? Lu Yu didn't remember such a famous figure in their class. Su Kinju was stunned for a moment when she saw the other party's face. However, thinking of the other party's arrogant attitude, her beauty filter instantly shattered and she said, I heard that there is a transfer student coming to our class, it should be her. Lu Yu frowned slightly. Although it was the first time they met, she felt an unkind aura from him. What's more, there are less than 3 months left before the college entrance examination, and most people probably won't choose to transfer to another school at this time. I always feel that the other person's appearance is a bit strange. The girl is wearing a bright red dress, which outlines her beautiful figure. Wearing black lambskin shoes, with her head raised high, and with an arrogant attitude, her beautiful eyes scanned the classroom, and finally her eyes fell on Lu Yu's seat. Then she walked over and stood directly in Lu Yu's seat. Sat down. Su Kinju frowned, this person is so rude. Why do you sit in someone else's seat without asking? Lu Yu was not angry, he walked forward and said, sorry, this is my seat. The girl said oh, but had no intention of standing up. Instead, she looked at Lu Yu provocatively and said, then please change seats. Why are you like this? Why do you take other people's seats? You like to other people's things so much. Even going to the toilet is new, Su Kinju said angrily, feeling that this new classmate was very annoying. Lu Yu discovered for the first time that this girl's mouth is quite mouthy. However, it can also be seen that the other party is indeed coming for me, but he doesn't know what her purpose is. The girl didn't pay attention to Su Kinju's clamor at all, her eyes fell directly on Lu Yu and said, I heard that you know Suanman magic, and I happen to know some, why don't we give it a try? If I win, if you win, this seat will be mine. If I lose, how about giving it back to you? Her voice was not low, and many people in the class heard it. For a moment, everyone looked in the direction of her and Lu Yu. The girl glanced at Lu Yu and thought that no one knew about it. Then she sneered and said, didn't she tell you? Your classmate Lu Yu is a master of catching ghosts. Due to what happened last time, everyone in the class knew that Lu Yu could tell fortunes, and her predictions were always accurate, but they didn't know that she could actually catch ghosts. Real or false, are there really ghosts in this world? I think it's true. My cousin had a high fever a while ago and couldn't get it down even after going to the hospital. My grandma insisted that it was a ghost, so she found a stamp that had been postmarked a long time ago and put it under my cousin's bed. Burn it off, call her name, and guess what, my cousin's fever actually went away. Huh. I also think it's true. When I was a child, I was in poor health and was always sick. Later, my family found a Taoist priest to look at feng shui. The Taoist priest said that the ancestral graves at home were not exposed to sunlight all year round, which affected the lives of our descendants. Health. Later, my father paid for the relocation of the ancestral grave, and my health actually improved. So mysterious. So, isn't Lu Yu very powerful? She is already very powerful. Last time we asked her to tell fortunes, was she accurate? Yes, I thought she could tell fortunes, but I didn't expect that she could also catch ghosts. She's so awesome. Do you think that if we ask Lu Yu to help us draw a talisman that will ensure that we pass the exam, will it be able to protect us during the college entrance examination? Successfully passed. That makes sense. Everyone looked eagerly in Lu Yu's direction. The expression on the girl's face froze. She originally revealed Lu Yu's identity to imply that she often dealt with ghosts and to alienate everyone from her. However, the reaction of these people was completely different from what she expected. She was so angry. As soon as Lu Xuan lay down, he was woken up. He raised his head and shouted impatiently, it's so noisy, why don't you let me sleep? The classroom was quiet for a moment, and then Su Kinja's voice was heard, Lu Zuan, don't sleep, someone is bullying you. Who? Who dares to bully my little aunt? Lu Zuan was frightened away from his sleep in an instant. Lu Zuan raised his head and immediately saw the girl sitting in Lu Yu's seat. Gee, someone actually bullied his little aunt under his nose and thought he was dead. Then he kicked the table in front of him and stood up. There was no sympathy for him here, so he saw her directly lifting him up from his seat. The girl's face turned dark, she stared at him and said, if you don't want your hand to become useless, just let me go quickly. Lu Zuan didn't take her threat seriously, looked her over and said, sister, which class are you in? You have quite a temper, and you actually came to our class to make trouble. You didn't ask about it before you came, but this class is, I'm covering it. Really? The girl's eyes froze, and a cold look flashed under her eyes. The next second, Lu Zuan's hand seemed to have been burned by something, and he quickly let go of the other party. You. Lu Zuan looked at his hands and stared at her in disbelief, what did you just do to me? Ha, the girl gave him a cold look, as if she were looking at an insignificant ant. Lu Zuan felt that he had been severely slighted, and he wanted to jump up and say, you, what is that look in your eyes? Please explain it clearly to me. You're not worthy of talking to me. The girl's contemptuous gaze swept over him, then turned to Lu Yu again and said, how about it, do you dare to compete with me? What did you say? Can you say it again if you can? Lu Zuan was angry, jumping up and down like a cat with explosive hair and yelled. Shut up, you're so noisy. The girl frowned and glared at him displeased. The next second, Lu Zuan was horrified to find that he was speechless. He covered his neck and stared in the girl's direction with his eyes wide open. Lu Yu's eyes couldn't help but darken, it turned out to be a forbidden speech spell. The girl ignored Lu Zuan's murderous look and looked at Lu Yu provocatively. Lu Yu was now sure that the other party was coming for him. What do you want? She said. Girl, as long as you agree to compete with me, I will help him untie it immediately. Okay, I promise you, since the other party is coming for you, even if you refuse, the other party will find other ways to force you to submit. Probably because Lu Yu agreed too readily, the woman narrowed her eyes slightly and said, why don't you ask me what I want to compare with you? It's up to you, Lu Yu said. When the girl heard this, she couldn't help but sneered, what a big tone. Okay, I heard that you are good at talismans, spells and alchemy, so I will compete with you on these three. But this is not a place for competition. Lunch break, I will wait for you on the top floor. Good. End of this chapter. Group Pet Koi Little Baby, she is soft and sweet. Author, Pearfish. Chapter 192. Chapter 192. You are not worthy of him. The girl waved her hand, and Lu Zuan immediately found that he could speak again. Others looked at the girl with fear and surprise. This new transfer student looks very difficult to mess with. Lu Zuan let out a deep breath. After he found that he could speak again, he immediately stared in the girl's direction and said, who are you? Why are you causing trouble for my little aunt? He finally figured out that this person was specifically looking for trouble with his little aunt. The girl glanced at him coolly, not paying attention to his clamor at all, and said, if you don't want to continue to be banned, then speak less. Lu Zuan. So angry. The girl immediately stood up from Lu Yu's seat and walked directly towards Lu Zuan. You, what do you want to do? Lu Zuan immediately became nervous. What does this woman want to do to herself? But the girl didn't even look at him. She walked to the empty seat next to him and sat down. You, who asked you to sit here? Lu Zuan was stunned for a moment, then jumped to his feet. The seat next to him was originally occupied, but he liked to sleep in class and felt uncomfortable sleeping on half a table, so he forced the person sitting next to him to change seats. He occupied a desk by himself and slept as much as he wanted. It was very comfortable, but this new girl tried to take his seat without saying a word, so Lu Xuan gave up. "Do you have any objections?" The girl raised her head and gave him a cool look. "Of course he has an opinion. What happened if he just wanted to say something to me?" But when the girl looked at him and thought about what he had been banned from talking about just now, he suddenly became scared and said with a pinched neck, I'm not afraid of you, I'm just too lazy to argue with you." "Ha," the girl sneered, stuffed her skull bag into the hole in the table, and didn't bother to pay attention to him. "Luzuana is aggrieved. Have you had enough trouble?" A cold voice sounded from the top floor of the school. The young man was leaning against the fence, his face was half facing the light, his black hair was scattered on his forehead, his eyebrows were delicate, and his features were deep. The wind on the rooftop was blowing his school uniform. Suyu raised his head slightly and looked at the person in front of him. This is an extremely young face, but not very similar to the face in memory. When he was in the underworld, his aura was even colder. People would only be shocked by his aura and subconsciously forget his age. Here, he looks like a real teenager. That's right, the person who just spoke was Gu Xingzi. The person standing opposite him was the girl who had just transferred to their class today. "Young master," the girl who had been arrogant and domineering in front of Lu Yu just now was a little more respectful towards Gu Xingzi. "Why are you here?" Gu Xingzi looked at the girl in front of him with a pair of cold eyes. "It was Lord Hades who asked me to come to the human world to find you and persuade you to return to the underworld as soon as possible to take charge of the overall situation." Suyu lowered his head slightly and replied respectfully. Gu Xingzi's expression remained unchanged, and he said expressionlessly, "You go back and tell your father that when the time comes, I will go back naturally. Also, he is the king of Hades, and he should handle the affairs of the underworld. Tell him that he is not doing his job properly. After so many years, it's time for him to fulfill his obligations as the master of his realm, and stop trying to blame everything on me." "Yes." After the girl finished speaking, she boldly raised her head and glanced in Gu Xingzi's direction, and said tentatively, "Is it because of that girl that the young master stayed in the human world and refused to go back? He is just a mere mortal, how can he be worthy of being in our underworld?" "Madam, young master." Gu Xingzi's eyes suddenly turned cold, and he looked at her with a warning, "This is my business, you have exceeded the rules. I won't let you care about what happened this morning, but I don't want it to happen again." "Young master." A trace of unwillingness flashed across the girl's face, and she wanted to say something else, but was coldly interrupted by Gu Xingzi, "I'm not negotiating with you. If you can't do it, even if you are sent by my father, I won't be polite to you either." Looking at Gu Xingzi's cold eyes, Suyu was suddenly startled, and a cold feeling appeared behind his back. Probably the person opposite seemed to have changed so much that she had almost forgotten the other person's methods. Although he was reluctant, he still lowered his head and said, "Yes, I understand. Gu Xingnu, since you know everything and you have nothing to do here, just go back to the underworld." Suyu's face turned pale and he said hurriedly, "No, I promised Pluto. If I can't take you back, I won't go back." Gu Xingzi glanced at her and finally said, "It's up to you." After saying that, he walked past her. In the classroom, Lu Yu watched the two people coming back from outside one after another, and his eyes flashed involuntarily. These two people have a problem. When Gu Xingzi walked up to her, Lu Yu couldn't help but ask, "Do you know each other?" Although it was a question, it was in a positive tone. Well, Gu Xingzi had a rare tenderness on his face. He raised his hand and rubbed her head and said, "I'll explain it to you when I get back tonight." "Oh." Suyu just walked in. When he saw this scene, his hands hanging by his sides clenched unconsciously. Although he promised Gu Xingzi that he would not cause trouble for Lu Yu again, when he passed by him, he still couldn't hold it back. He paused in his steps, looked at her, and said with provocation on his face, "You are not worthy of him." Lu Yu didn't know why the other party was targeting her at first, but after learning that the two knew each other and the other party's tone at the moment, she finally understood where the other party's hostility came from. He turned around and glanced in the direction of Gu Xingzi. This was probably another debt caused by the other party. As if sensing her gaze, Gu Xingzi raised his head, his cold black eyes softened, and the corners of his mouth raised a slight arc. Lu Yu couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth. He then retracted his gaze and looked at the girl in front of him again. "I don't deserve it." "Is it possible that you can deserve it?" Su Yu froze. In front of Gu Xingzi, she did not dare to say those few words. She only said, "In short, his significant other will never be you." Lu Yu didn't know why she was so sure that Xingxing's other half was not her. Thinking that the other half could also cast spells, could it be that she was also from the underworld? It is understandable to think that she is just a girl from the human world and is not worthy of their young master from the underworld. Lu Yu was not angry at all. He looked at the other party and replied unhurriedly, "Even if it wasn't me, it wouldn't be you. Besides, it's not you who has the final say whether you deserve it or not. You." The girl was suddenly stabbed in the foot and couldn't help but change her expression. However, she quickly calmed down and said provocatively, "Don't be so proud. He will go back to where he belongs sooner or later. At least I can always stay with him, and you and him belong to two worlds after all, and there will be no results." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Group Pet Koi Little Baby, she is soft and sweet. Author, Pearfish. Chapter 193. Chapter 193 Bet. Probably because he was afraid of really annoying Gu Xingzi, after saying that, Su Yu returned to his seat. Humph, a mortal's lifespan is only a few decades, and even she wants to stay by the young master's side forever. Dream. As for Lu Yu, thinking about what the other party said, he couldn't help but fell into deep thought. Although she already knew Gu Xingzi's identity, she had never really considered their future. She has not graduated from high school yet, so it is too early to talk about the future. As for what the other party said about being able to get married at the age of 16 in the underworld, she didn't take it to heart at all. It's not hard to think about it. Why do you want to get married young? However, the other person will definitely return to the underworld in the future. As a human girl, even if I can refine life-sustaining pills to extend my life, I will still be different from the other person. Does she really want to go to the underworld to live with him in the future? Su Qinju went to the toilet and came back just in time to see Su Yu leaving Lu Yu's table. Seeing Lu Yu's thoughtful expression, she couldn't help but run forward and asked, "What are you thinking about? Did she cause trouble for you again just now?" Fortunately, Lu Yu is not the kind of person who likes to get into trouble. If he doesn't understand, he just doesn't think about it. He raised his head, smiled reassuringly at Su Qinju and said, "It's nothing." Su Qinju glanced in Su Yu's direction, then leaned into Lu Yu's ear and said with a gossipy face, "Why do I think she is here for Gu Xiaoki? Have you noticed it too?" Lu Yu raised his eyebrows. "It seems that it is not her imagination, the new transfer student really has ideas about seeing. Really?" Su Qinju's eyes lit up. She glanced in the direction of Su Yu, then lowered her head and whispered to Lu Yu, "Did you also find out? I'm telling you, why is she targeting you when she's so good? It must be because you have a crush on Mr. Gu. You have to be careful, he is not easy to get along with." Su Qinju warned her worriedly. Lu Yu smiled and said, "Don't worry. I know what to do." The other party is not easy to get along with, and she is not a soft persimmon who can be pinched by anyone. During lunch, Lu Yu couldn't help but ask Gu Xingzi about Su Yu. The opponent made an appointment with me to compete on the rooftop at noon, but I didn't know anything about the opponent's strength. As the saying goes, only by knowing yourself and the enemy can you win every battle. Gu Xingzi raised his eyes and glanced at her, with a hint of helplessness and fondness in his eyes. I just thought of asking now, don't you think it's too late? Seeing how happily you agreed, I thought you weren't worried at all. Lu Yu didn't want to agree, but the other party made it clear that he was only here for her. If she didn't agree, the other party would definitely not give up. So, she is very powerful. If the other party really comes from the underworld, I am afraid that his strength is far beyond what I can match. Gu Xingzi, her mother is the #1 female warrior in the underworld. She was taught by her mother step by step. What do you think? Lu Yu. She is not arrogant enough to think that she is the most powerful person in the world. However, you don't have no chance at all. You will most likely not be able to match her in terms of spell cultivation alone. However, in recent years, she has focused most of her energy on cultivating spiritual power and spells, and is not proficient in talismans and alchemy. You still have some opportunities. Just a few. I wonder if it's too late for her to regret it now. Gu Xingzi looked at her slightly discouraged face and said with a smile, after all, I have been away from the underworld for a while, and I am not very clear about her current strength. But don't worry, I will go with you. Better farewell. We agreed to compete, so taking the other party would not make the other party question the unfairness of the competition. She is not someone who cannot afford to lose. Since she agreed, she must lose with dignity even if she loses. Okay, then be careful so you didn't dare to really hurt her. When Lu Yu arrived, Su Yu was already waiting for her on the rooftop. Many people heard that the two were going to compete on the rooftop. As soon as they finished eating, they rushed to the rooftop to watch the excitement, but they found that the exit to the rooftop was blocked by an invisible force. The door is obviously there, but you can't get through it. Su Yu looked at Lu Yu, who came alone for the appointment. I promised you, master, that I won't embarrass you. As long as you can beat me, I won't stop you from getting close to master. On the contrary, I hope you can recognize yourself because of my identity. I consciously stay away from the young master. Lu Yu refused without thinking. I can't do this request, so I'll find another one. What, are you afraid of losing? Su Yu said provocatively. Lu Yu did not change his mind because of the opponent's provocation. His expression and voice were very calm, and he said, whether I win or lose, I will not take seeing as a bet. Su Yu snorted coldly. In the final analysis, it's just your lack of ability. If you can't even defeat me, what qualifications do you think you have to stand by the young master? How can you convince the underworld of 100,000 soldiers? I've said it before, you two are not from the same world. If you don't listen to the advice, you will be the only one who gets hurt in the end. Whether you are qualified or not is not up to you. She had indeed not considered this issue before, but she didn't need others to make decisions for her about the future. If it was really the person she decided to be with, she would try her best to stand by his side no matter how difficult it was. In that case, let's start the competition directly. Su Yu saw that he couldn't persuade the other party, so he stopped wasting his words. What do you want to compete with first? Lu Yu thought about what Gu Xingzi told her, that she only had hope in talisman and alchemy, so she said, we have classes in the afternoon, so let's compete together. Compare together? Su Yu narrowed his eyes and looked at her in surprise. Lu Yu, it takes too long to make alchemy. If you use normal alchemy techniques, you can't tell the winner in a short time. How about we each set up an accelerated time array and use talismans to increase it? Who can do it in half an hour? How about whoever refines a high-grade elixir will win? This is to combine the three methods of seal formation and alchemy. To put it bluntly, it depends on who has deep spiritual power and whose alchemy technique is better. Lu Yu also tried it for the first time. Okay, Su Yu pondered for a moment and then nodded in agreement. Although Su Yu focused on studying spells, after finding out that the other party was good at talisman writing and alchemy, he specifically found the most powerful alchemist in the underworld to teach her. The alchemy of the underworld is naturally not comparable to that of the human world. She can now refine 5th grade elixirs. Although it is not very powerful, it is expected to be enough to compete with the opponent's mere mortal. Then let's get started, Lu Yu said. After speaking, take out the Bagua furnace from the system space. This area is surrounded by a barrier, so you don't have to worry about scaring others by taking things out of thin air. End of this chapter. Group Pet Koi Little Baby, She is Soft and Sweet. Author, Pearfish. Chapter 194. Chapter 194 The Unbridgeable Gap. Su Yu's status in the underworld is not low. He has seen many good things since he was a child. He immediately recognized that the alchemy furnace in Lu Yu's hand was a top-grade spiritual weapon. She looked at Lu Yu and sneered, "You don't think you can beat me with a high-grade alchemy furnace, do you? Lu Yu, whether you can win or not, you have to compete to know. There is no shortage of good things in the underworld." Su Yu opened the sea of consciousness and took out a purple pill furnace. The alchemy furnace emits a dazzling purple light, and Lu Yu instantly feels powerful fluctuations in spiritual power. The system's excited voice sounded in his mind, "It's the best spiritual weapon, the 7-fire copper furnace. One is a high-grade spiritual weapon, and the other is a top-grade spiritual weapon. You can tell whose alchemy furnace is more powerful just from the name. Lu Yu. Let's get started." The latter glanced at her proudly, and then took out the medicinal materials prepared in advance from the sea of consciousness, all of which were precious elixirs that could not be found in the human world. Lu Yu couldn't help but feel glad that he had a system, otherwise, he would have lost even before he competed with her. The two of them selected the medicinal materials and put them into the alchemy furnace. However, they did not rush to start refining the elixir. Instead, they mobilized their spiritual power to prepare the formation first. Lu Yu has never set up this kind of formation before. Fortunately, she has the all-powerful Xiao Jin. Under the guidance of the system, although she is not skilled in the formation, luckily she succeeded in the first try. The flow of spiritual power forms a unique small world of its own, which can also be said to be another level of space. Time in the space is compressed, and there may only be dozens or even minutes in a month outside. Of course, this is extremely consuming of spiritual energy. If there is insufficient spiritual energy, it will be difficult to maintain the small world. On the contrary, the stronger the spiritual power, the longer the formation can be maintained and the shorter the time is compressed. With Lu Yu's current ability, she can only last for half an hour at most, so she must make the elixir within half an hour. Fortunately, she had saved a few spirit-gathering pills before, so that if her spiritual power was insufficient, she would be able to use them to support her. With the formation completed, the two men immediately began to refine the elixir. At the entrance to the rooftop, Lu Zuan looked at the transparent barrier in front of him, and then at Gu Xingzi, who looked calm next to him. "Hey, aren't you worried about my little aunt being bullied?" "Have you ever seen her being bullied?" Gu Xingzi asked calmly. "That's not true. Ever since he was a child, his little aunt had been extremely popular. Occasionally, there would be one or two people who couldn't stand her, and he would be unlucky before they could do anything. In short, I have never seen the other party suffer a loss. Let's go." Gu Xingzi glanced at the direction of the barrier and then turned around. "Aren't you going to stay and wait for the result?" Lu Zuan was a little dissatisfied with his reaction. This boy acted too calmly. It has nothing to do with his fiancée at all. It seems that I need to persuade my great-grandfather to reconsider the engagement between the two of them. Gu Xingzi raised his eyes and looked at him and said, the competition will not end in half an hour. Are you sure you want to wait here? How do you know? Lu Zuan looked at him suspiciously. Could it be that his aunt told him in advance? Gu Xingzi naturally would not tell the other party that he could see what was happening in the barrier. So far, only Lu Yu knew about his identity as the young master of the underworld. Gu Xingzi didn't explain it to him, and Lu Zuan also felt that waiting was too boring. He didn't know when the competition would end, so he simply went back to the classroom to catch up on his sleep. About 20 minutes later, Su Yu finished refining the alchemy ahead of schedule, but was not in a hurry to start the furnace. After the elixir is made, you need to use Yun Dan to make the elixir more effective. Seeing that Lu Yu hadn't finished refining it yet, he simply withdrew the time formation. After half an hour, Lu Yu was able to take back the formation. It looks like the refining has just been completed, and there is no time for Yundan. You must know that Yundan is a key part of alchemy and can directly affect the quality of the elixir. Su Yu glanced at her and couldn't help but raise the corner of his mouth and said, open the furnace. After saying that, he took the lead in opening the furnace. Lu Yu also followed her closely and opened the alchemy furnace. As the two of them finished refining the elixir, a strong fragrance of elixir came out. What does it smell like? It smells so good. Have the flowers planted in our school bloomed? What flowers are so fragrant? I asked my mother to plant some in front of my house. Why doesn't it smell like flowers to me? How about we go out and have a look? Although Su Yu sealed the rooftop to prevent others from approaching, he could not stop the fragrance of the elixir from spreading. The entire school was bathed in the fragrance of elixir, attracting the surrounding creatures to gather around. The students didn't know about the elixir. They only knew that the smell was refreshing. After smelling it, they felt as if they had been injected with blood. Look, there are many birds, they are all flying towards the rooftop. Su Yu is refining a 5th grade marrow cleansing pill, which can help people cleanse their essence and cut their marrow, directly improving their cultivation to a higher level. There are 3 pills in total, with clear elixir patterns, and they are all top-grade elixirs. Su Yu was originally very satisfied with the elixir she refined. When she saw the elixir in Lu Yu's hand, the expression on her face couldn't help but stiffen. What Lu Yu refines is the beauty elixir. To put it bluntly, the beauty elixir is for people to beautify their skin. There is only one, but there are 7 pill patterns on it. The 7th grade beauty elixir can not only rejuvenate a person, but also make a person's appearance stay at the age of 18 forever. How can it be? How could a mere mortal on the other side have such powerful spiritual energy and be able to refine a 7th grade elixir? You must know that refining the 7th grade elixir requires not only precious medicinal materials and high-grade elixir furnaces, but also the infusion of powerful spiritual power. I thought that with the other party's spiritual power, he could at most refine a 3rd grade elixir. Lu Yu was very satisfied with the elixir she refined. She had never tried to refine the 7th grade elixir before due to time constraints, but she did not expect that she succeeded in refining it the first time. It is indeed the koi carp loved by the koi immortal. Although the beauty pill is not as valuable as the bodybuilding pill, it is a 7th grade pill, and its quality has surpassed 2 levels. That is a gap that many alchemists may not be able to cross in their lifetime. Furthermore, at the beginning of the competition, it was not stated what elixir to refine. It was only stated that the quality of the elixir was to be considered. The 7th grade elixir was naturally better than the 5th grade elixir. Although Su Yu was unwilling to do so, he had to admit that he had lost. With a dark face, he took out something from the sea of consciousness, threw it to Lu Yu and said, "This is what Master Pluto asked me to hand over to you." When Lu Yu heard that it was given by Pluto, a look of surprise appeared on his face. He carefully looked at the things thrown by the other party and found a black and golden token half the size of a palm. I didn't understand the use of this thing, so I couldn't help but raise my head and asked, "What is this?" Suyu had a cold face and said reluctantly, "This is a ghost order that allows you to freely enter and exit the underworld." What she did not say was that this token not only allows you to freely enter and exit the underworld, but can also order the ghosts in the underworld. End of this chapter. Group Pet Koi Little Baby, She is Soft and Sweet. Author, Pearfish. Chapter 195. Chapter 195 Finale. But just because she didn't say it didn't mean that Lu Yu didn't know. In her mind, classmate Xiao Jin had already helped her learn about the functions of ghost orders. This is the token in the underworld second only to the Pluto's order. With this, she won't even have to burn paper money in the future. She can summon ghost soldiers anytime and anywhere, and can even mobilize hundreds of thousands of ghost soldiers in the underworld. Pluto actually gave her such an important thing. It seems that the future father-in-law is quite generous. Can handle. Lu Yu held the token and said to Suyu with a smile, "Thank Pluto for me." Seeing the smile on her face, Suyu felt even more depressed. He glared at her and snorted coldly, "Don't be proud. Don't think that getting the ghost order means Pluto's recognition of you. To tell you the truth, Pluto, it's just for you to persuade the young master to return to the underworld as soon as possible." Lu Yu doesn't care what the other person says, she only knows that it is a good thing. It didn't matter why Pluto gave it to her, she had it anyway and it was fine if she could use it. Going down from the rooftop, you saw Gu Xingzi guarding the stairs. Suyu glanced at the other person, then past the two of them and returned to the classroom. Lu Yu raised his eyebrows, looked at the other person and said, "You won't be waiting here forever, will you?" Gu Xingzi, "No, I guess your competition is about to end. Come and have a look. Are you worried that I will lose?" "No, I know you will win." "How do you know?" The moment the opponent took out the 7-fire copper furnace, she was not sure she could win. Fortunately, as Xing Xing said, the other party has deep spiritual power and is a little inferior in alchemy. This can be regarded as opportunistic. If it were a pure competition between spells and spiritual power, he would definitely lose. Gu Xingzi looked at her fondly, "I smelled the fragrance of the elixir just now. It's a 7th grade elixir. You should have refined it, right?" Lu Yu said with a smile, "You can actually smell several pills. It seems that the really powerful person is you. Unfortunately, this pill is specifically for women and cannot be given to you. I plan to give it to my future mother-in-law." Gu Xingzi was stunned for a moment before he came to his senses. He looked at her with some amusement and some confusion. This girl has never answered him directly before, but now she even called her future mother-in-law. "Look," Lu Yu then took out the token. "Ghost order." Gu Xingzi looked at the token in her hand with some surprise, then smiled and said, "My father actually gave this to you. It seems that he is very satisfied with you as his future daughter-in-law." "Yeah, I think so too," Lu Yu said with a smile, eyes bent, "Your father is so generous, so naturally I can't be stingy. So I plan to give the 7th grade beauty elixir I just successfully refined to your mother-in-law. The mother-in-law will definitely like it," Gu Xingzi said with a smile. As for why her father gave her gifts but she wanted to give gifts to his mother and concubine in return, Gu Xingzi didn't ask her. Lu Yu played with the token in her hand, and the more she looked at it, the more she liked it. Is this considered to have been approved by both parents? "Wake up, when the college entrance examination is over, will you take me to the underworld?" She wanted to see where she might live in the future. "Okay," Gu Xingzi looked at her with his deep eyes, his eyes were indescribably gentle. "In June, the college entrance examination is coming as scheduled." Lu Yu and Gu Xingzi were lucky enough to be assigned to the same examination room, while Lu Zuan and Zhang Qingshu were assigned to other classrooms. Before entering the examination room, Lu Yu took out 2 koi lucky bags and handed them to the two of them and said, here are these for you. I hope that you will be able to pass the test on the possession of gods and everything will be correct. Lu Xuan couldn't help but his eyes lit up, and he instantly said with confidence, sure enough, it is my little aunt who is reliable. He grew up with his aunt, and the first gift he received from her was a koi lucky bag. He knows the power of the blessing bag sent by his little aunt best. Having this is much more useful than praying to God for blessings or staying up late to read a book 800 times. Jiang Qingshu was stunned as she held the lucky bag. She didn't expect that it would even come to her, let alone that one day she would be able to walk into the examination room like a normal person. And all this is because of meeting this girl in front of me. Without the other party, I am afraid that I would no longer be in this world. Although she rejected the Zhang family, she saved his life, and he would never forget this for the rest of his life. From now on, if she wants something, he will follow her. Thank you, I was so moved that I couldn't help but smile knowingly at Lu Yu. Gu Xingzi saw that even Zhang Qing had a letter, but he didn't have one. He couldn't help but smile and asked, where's mine? Lu Yu raised her eyes and glanced at him and said, you don't need to. You are the one who is testing the gods yourself. However, I have something else to give you. She looked at him with clear eyes. What is it? Gu Xingzi asked. The next second, Lu Yu stood up on tiptoes and gave him a quick kiss on the face. Without waiting for Gu Xingzi's reaction, she had stood back to the place, and Qiao Qian said, get the lucky kiss of this koi. This year's college entrance examination champion must be you. Her movements were quick, gentle, and sudden. Gu Xingzi was stunned for a moment, and by the time he realized it, everything was over. Looking at the girl's weird look, it was funny and helpless. This girl is always so unexpected. Then she said with a doting smile, okay. As long as it's what she wants, it doesn't matter if she gets the top prize. Ahem. Next to him, an inappropriate cough sounded. I asked you to, can you please restrain yourself? Are there two big people standing next to you? Can't you see them? Isn't it unkind to feed people dog food in the examination room? Lu Xuan's loud voice sounded, provoking the candidates around him all looked over. Lu Yu didn't feel anything when we kissed him just now. He just did it as he wanted. When the other party yelled at him, he showed a bit of surprise. He glared at him and said, do you have any objections? Lu Xuanzui said, don't dare, how about you two continue? Just pretend that we don't exist. Don't be such a talker, why don't you go to your examination room quickly? Lu Yu was too lazy to talk to him. Let's go, Lu Xuan waved to the two of them, took 2 steps, then turned around and urged Jiang Qingshu, what are you looking at? I think the dog food is not enough. I know, Jiang Qingshu smiled good-naturedly and said to Lu Yu, I'm going to the examination room first. Good. Let's go too, Gu Xingzi immediately called Lu Yu. The two of them entered the examination room one after another. Lu Yu's seat is in the first row, and Gu Xingzi's seat is in the last row. Lu Yu found a seat and sat down. After checking his examination equipment, he turned around and glanced in the direction of Gu Xingzi, who raised his head as if sensing her gaze. The two looked at each other and smiled. More and more people are entering the examination room. The college entrance examination is the end point and also a new starting point. The world is boring, but I am lucky to have you. In the future, I hope it will be you when I turn around, it will be you when I move forward, and it will be you for the rest of my life. Over.